Welcome to the Baboom Baboom podcast, your go-to source for expert tips on car stereo installation, vehicle wiring, and all things wiring related. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started, we've got the advice to help you power up your ride. Get ready to crank up the volume on your knowledge and make your next wiring project a success.
Okay, so you're ready to tackle that home electrical project? Good for you. But before you start rewiring your entire house, let's talk about safety.
Yeah,
Electricity is amazing, but it demands respect, right?
it does.
This deep dive is all about making sure your next project is a success story, not a cautionary tale.
Right.
And we're lucky to have this awesome guide from Baboom Baboon on safely extending electrical circuits.
Absolutely. And the guide really hits on something important right off the bat, planning.
Okay.
You might be surprised how much planning goes into electrical work. It's more than just deciding where you want that new outlet to go.
Oh, I bet. I'm already intrigued. What kind of planning are we talking about?
Well, it all starts with understanding your power needs. Imagine your home's electrical system like a network of highways.
Okay.
Each circuit is a lane, and appliances are the cars. Add too many cars to a lane, and you get a traffic jam, or in this case, a tripped breaker.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do we avoid causing a power grid traffic jam in our homes?
The key is to assess how much power your new appliance or device will actually draw when it's running. This is measured in amps, and the article does a great job of explaining how to find this information.
So we're not just eyeballing it and hoping for the best.
Definitely not. Underestimating those power needs is a recipe for tripped breakers, overheated wires, and in some cases even fire hazards.
Okay, that's definitely not the DIY outcome I'm going for.
Yeah.
So we've got our power needs figured out. What's next on the planning checklist?
This is where things get really interesting. You can't just run wires wherever you please. You have to consider local electrical codes and get any necessary permits.
Permits for electrical work. I'll admit, I didn't even know that was a thing.
It is, and for good reason. These codes and permits are designed to ensure safety and prevent accidents.
Right.
Think of it like this. You wouldn't want someone building a house next door without following building codes, right?
Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
So we've got our power needs mapped out. We're all squared away with the local codes and permits. Are we ready to dive into the actual work?
Not quite. Before you even think about touching a wire, let's talk about the tools and materials you'll need.
This is the part I actually enjoy. New tools for a new project, always exciting.
Right. But it's not just about having the right tools. It's about understanding why they're important.
Okay.
Take wire gauge, for example.
Okay, wire gauge. Now that sounds kind of important. Can you break it down for me?
Think of it like water flowing through a hose.
Okay.
A thin garden hose is fine for watering your plants.
Right?
But imagine trying to use it to put out a fire. It's just not going to cut it.
Yeah.
The same principle applies to electrical wires.
So a thin wire is like trying to force a fire hose's worth of water through a garden hose. That can't be good.
Exactly. Using a wire that's too thin for the amount of electricity flowing through it can lead to overheating, damage to your wiring, and yep, you guessed it, potential fire hazards.
Okay, noted. Definitely don't want to skip the wire gauge lesson. So how do we know which gauge to use?
The article provides a handy table that shows which wire gauge is appropriate for different amperage needs. And it's worth taking the time to understand how to read it because this is one of those areas where getting it right is crucial.
Okay, I'm with you. Safety first. What else do we need in our electrical toolkit before we get started? So we've got our wire gauge figured out. We've got our safety glasses perched on our nose. What's next?
Well, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we can't forget the golden rule of electrical work. Safety first.
Right.
Before you even think about touching those wires, you absolutely need to disconnect the power.
Right. Safety first. That seems like a good mantra to have for this entire project. But really, how do we make sure the power is completely off?
Locate your breaker box
Okay.
and flip the corresponding breaker to the OFF position. But don't stop there. Always double check with a voltage tester to make absolutely sure there's no current flowing through those wires. Trust me. It's better to be overly cautious than sorry.
Okay, power's off. Voltage tester confirms it. Can we finally start running some wires?
We're getting there. But remember how we talked about planning being crucial? Well, now it's time to plan out your wire routes. This isn't just about aesthetics. It's about safety and efficiency.
Okay, so no randomly drilling holes in the walls and hoping for the best. What should we be considering when mapping out these wire routes?
Think about any obstacles you might encounter. Plumbing pipes, HVAC bucks, other electrical wires, you don't want to drill into anything vital. The article mentions using a stud finder to locate safe spots to run your wires.
Need top-quality electrical wire? Baboom Baboom's got you covered. Get your 6-pack today. Each combo comes in 6 different colors and a total of 600 feet of wire. Perfect for any project, and you won't find a better price in the industry. Head over to baboombaboom.com now to snag yours. That's baboombaboom.com.
And I imagine keeping those wires away from things like heat sources is also a good idea, right?
Absolutely. Heat and electricity don't mix well, so map out your routes, keep them clear of obstacles, and avoid those tight bends. Now, once you have your route planned out, it's time to install the electrical boxes for your new outlet or switch.
So this is where it starts to feel real. We're actually installing things. The article mentions using a drywall saw for this part. Is that really necessary?
Absolutely. A drywall saw will give you those nice clean cuts you need for a professional-looking installation. Plus, it's much safer than trying to hack away at your wall with a blunt instrument.
And nobody wants a wonky outlet, right?
Exactly. You want those boxes flush with the wall for a clean finish.
Okay, boxes are in, routes are planned, we're really getting somewhere. Now, about actually running those wires, the article mentions something called fish tape, and I'll admit, it sounds a bit intimidating.
Fish tape is your new best friend, trust me.
Okay.
Imagine a flexible measuring tape, but instead of hooking onto things, it has a small hook or loop on the end.
Okay.
You feed this tape through the wall cavity from one electrical box to the other, following that carefully planned route. Then you attach your electrical wire to the end and use the tape to pull it through. It's all about finesse, not force.
So it's less about brute strength and more about strategic maneuvering. I can handle that.
Exactly. Now, once your wires are run, you need to secure them properly to the studs or joists. The article stresses the importance of using the correct fasteners and techniques to ensure those wires aren't dangling loose inside your walls.
Because loose wires sound like a recipe for trouble. Speaking of trouble, is there anything else we need to watch out for at this stage?
Absolutely. When you're securing those wires, be mindful of sharp edges.
Right.
You don't want your wires rubbing against a rough edge and wearing down over time. That's another potential fire hazard we want to avoid. Think of it like this. You wouldn't want to wear a scratchy wool sweater next to your bare skin all day, right?
Yeah.
It's the same principle with wires and sharp edges.
Ouch. Yeah, that's a good way to get a nasty scrape. And I'm guessing an electrical scrape is much worse than a wool sweater mishap.
So we've got our wires run. They're secured. No sharp edges in sight. What's the next step in our electrical adventure? Okay, we're in the home stretch now. We've got our electrical boxes installed, our wires run and secured. What's next? Time to finally connect everything. Almost. This is another one of those moments where the Baboom article really shines. It provides incredibly clear explanations of how to make those final connections safely and correctly.
I'm all ears. What do we need to know?
Well, the article goes into detail about stripping the wire insulation to expose the right amount of copper, and then using wire connectors, those are also called wire nuts, to join the wires securely.
Wire necks.
Yeah.
Those little plastic caps that twist onto the wires.
Exactly. They seem simple enough, but there's a definite technique to using them correctly. The article explains how to make sure those connections are tight and secure so you don't have any loose wires causing problems down the road.
And by problems, we mean sparks, potential fires, all that not fun stuff.
Precisely. It's all about making sure that electricity can flow smoothly and safely through those connections.
Okay, so we've meticulously followed the instructions. Our connections are solid. Our wire nuts are snug. Tell me it's time to turn the power back on.
Hold your horses just a little longer. Before you flip that breaker, it's time for the most important step of all. Testing.
Of course. Safety first, even when we're 99% sure we did everything right.
Exactly. Double check all your connections one last time. Make sure nothing is touching that shouldn't be. Then and only then can you flip the breaker back on. But don't walk away just yet. Stand by and watch for any red flags.
Red flags like sparks flying out of the outlet or the smell of burning plastic.
Well, hopefully it won't be that dramatic. But yes, be on the lookout for any sparks, smoke, or unusual smells. And it's a good idea to double check that your new outlet or switch is actually working correctly.
Okay, checks out. Everything is working beautifully. Can I do my victory dance now?
You've earned it. But before you get too carried away, there's one final, often overlooked step: labeling. Baboom wisely reminds us to label that new circuit on our breaker panel.
Oh, that's a good point. I can't tell you how many times I've stood in front of my breaker box staring at a jumble of switches, trying to remember which one controls what.
Right. And while it may seem like a small detail, labeling that new circuit can save you a major headache down the line, especially if you need to make repairs or changes in the future. Trust me, your future self will thank you.
I'm sold. Labeled it is.
Yeah.
So we've planned, we've prepped, we've extended that circuit like pros, we've tested, and we've even labeled. We've learned about assessing power needs, decoding those electrical codes, choosing the right materials, and following safety precautions like their gospel. What an adventure.
It's been quite a journey. And remember, while this deep dive has armed you with a solid understanding of extending electrical circuits, it's equally important to recognize when a project might be beyond your comfort zone. Knowing your limits and when to call in a licensed electrician is just as important as knowing how to use a wire stripper.
Absolutely. There's no shame in calling in the pros, especially when dealing with something as potentially dangerous as electricity.
Well said.
So as you embark on your electrical adventures, remember what we've learned today. Knowledge is power, both figuratively and literally. Keep learning, stay safe, and may your circuits always be complete.
Need top-quality electrical wire? Baboom Baboom's got you covered. Get your 6-pack today. Each combo comes in 6 different colors and a total of 600 feet of wire. Perfect for any project, and you won't find a better price in the industry. Head over to baboombaboom.com now to snag yours. That's baboombaboom.com.